Our thanks to Jeff Zeleny for that report. Let's get some more perspective on the trip. We're joined by CNN senior military analyst Admiral James Stavridis. He's a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander and now a partner at the Carlyle Group, a global investment firm. Admiral Stavridis, great to see you. A lot to unpack here. Quite a number of developments for the president on this three-leg trip. Multiple countries greeted with pomp and circumstance by all three leaders. He does feel, or seem to feel, quite comfortable in the Gulf region and is quite invested in the relationship and partnerships with these nations. I'm wondering what your view is, the takeaways that you've had from this trip, in addition to the business deals being made, a lot of diplomacy as well, and some firsts, especially meeting with the Syrian president, the first time we've seen that between the U.S. leader and the Syrian leader in some 25 years. And in addition to that, lifting sanctions that had been leveled against the country for a number of years since the Civil War.
Yeah, the thing that leaps out at anybody is three big things on the trip: business, business, and business. Clearly, the White House agenda going into this was to put up big numbers, and they did. By my count, well over $1 trillion of promised investment, purchases, and deals in the United States. That's very significant. Let's follow it. Let's make sure, as the saying goes, follow the money. Let's make sure it actually flows. But I think that was the beating heart of this trip. Now, Bianna, you are absolutely correct. There's always going to be a kind of diplomatic, geopolitical underpinning to it. And in that regard, what really struck me was the split screen, if you will. You just mentioned one of the screens. President Trump in effectively a direct meeting with a former terrorist. We had a $10 million bounty on the current head of Syria, and the nation was under every sanction imaginable. Now, President Trump met with him. This was brokered by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. That's one screen. What's the other screen? It's an empty screen. No meeting in Israel. The President of the United States made no effort to go there. Pretty significant evidence of real disagreements between the Trump administration and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And personally, to close here, I think President Trump is on the right side of these issues. He's trying to reset the table in the Middle East, meeting with the Syrian, the opening to Iran that Jeff just talked about, creating at least a ceasefire between the U.S. and the Houthis, and getting a hostage home from Hamas, an American citizen. None of those involved Israel. To me, that's quite striking. That's the big diplomatic and geopolitical takeaway, Bianna.
Yeah, quite fascinating that Prime Minister Netanyahu was watching all of this sort of marginalized from the sidelines there. But you mentioned the ceasefire deal with the Houthis. It is worth noting that I believe the Houthis launched not one but two missiles against Israel over the territory where the president had been at one point, over Saudi Arabia during this time. Obviously, that ceasefire deal caught Israel by surprise. And also the fact that the president not only met with the Syrian leader, but also lifted sanctions unilaterally. Even some European allies had said maybe this should be done incrementally. And then to top things off, there's the push for a nuclear deal with Iran. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, we know all of these things take time, they take investment, they take obviously getting to know and trust some of these figures and getting into the nitty-gritty details. The president seems very antsy to get any sort of deal on the table. And I'm wondering if, in your view, especially as it relates to Iran, if he is too anxious for a deal at this point.
I think you have to be very careful that you don't create a scenario that in 2 years or 4 years or 8 years, you look back and say, boy, we missed a turn, and the Iranians somehow end up with a nuclear weapon. What you have to do is go into this with one bedrock fact, and that is that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Why? Because they have promised to use it to obliterate Israel, our strongest ally, partner, and friend in the region. So if you go into it with that as a bedrock, then you can have some flexible arrangements. And I think it is a good thing to put pressure on them by saying, look, let's talk now, otherwise something bad will happen. Clearly, the bad thing would be strikes on the Iranian nuclear program as it exists today, presumably combined by Israel and the United States. So I think the Trump administration is holding a big stick there. Iran has never been in a weaker position. As long as you hew to that bedrock principle, whatever we do, it's kind of physician do no harm. Whatever we do here, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. I think going in eyes wide open, now's the time to press hard.
Yeah, and the question over whether Iran will be allowed to enrich uranium, even for civilian purposes, is the big sticking point right now. I do want to ask you about these negotiations, the talks happening in Turkey with lower-level Ukrainian and Russian officials, without President Trump, without President Putin, without President Zelensky. Zelensky was the only one who really showed up. And President Trump, unlike what you're hearing from President Zelensky and some of the other European allies, seems to be, again, allowing Vladimir Putin to move the goalpost, as we heard from Jeff Zeleny. Instead of calling him out for not attending this meeting, he now says, oh, but he's always just wanted to have a one-on-one with me first. You even have the United States former ambassador to Ukraine penning an op-ed this morning suggesting that the president seems to be placating Vladimir Putin. What do you make of this dynamic?
To switch metaphors from goalpost to the boxing ring, I think Putin is playing rope-a-dope. He's just kind of leaning back on those ropes. And what Putin wants is the other boxer, Ukraine, not to be allowed to raise his arms at all. So it's an untenable situation. And I think it is hopefully about to hit a point where President Trump says three things to Vladimir Putin pretty directly. He can do it with a smile on his face. He can do it at a direct one-on-one meeting. But here's what the president needs to say. Number one, we're going to continue to supply arms to Ukraine. Number two, we're going to stand with our major European partners here and use secondary sanctions if necessary. Number three, you know that $300 billion in Russian money that's in banks in Brussels? That's at risk for you too, Vladimir. And again, you can do all that with a smile on your face and push at him hard and tell him, now's the time, you're out of cards. Let's go ahead and get a ceasefire. Let's start with that. Then let's get real negotiators to the table. Final thought, the team that Putin sent to the talks, it's certainly not him. It's not the B team. That would be the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, Shoigu, the defense minister, etc. That would be the B team. This isn't even the C team. I've never heard of these people. I spent a lot of time studying Russia. Looks to me like an almost calculated insult to Zelensky and also to the United States of America. President Trump ought to register that as well with Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, that's exactly how President Zelensky described it as well. We'll see if the president follows your advice there, instituting those 3 points. We'll be following it all. Admiral James Stavridis, thank you as always.
Thanks, Bianna.